When three well-known faces of German football find their way to the Turkish Super Lig almost at the same time, it is more than just a brief side note in the sports news. It is a statement that makes the entire football world sit up and take notice. Ilkay Gündogan, the strategist who has won everything, Leroy Sané, the eternal enigma of world-class talent, and Davie Selke, the tireless fighter from the second row. They all followed the call of the Bosphorus in the summer of 2025, but the reality for each of them looks different from what the glossy images promised during their official presentations. Let's start with Ilkay Gündogan. When the captain of the German national team and Champions League winner signed with Galatasaray Istanbul, the airport in Istanbul resembled a madhouse. Thousands of fans waited for hours to catch a glimpse of the prodigal son who had finally returned to the land of his parents. It was the transfer that President Dursun Özbek had dreamed of for years. Gündogan did not arrive as a player past his prime, but as someone who had led Manchester City onto the field as captain only a few months earlier. However, the romance of the reception quickly evaporated in the harsh, everyday reality of the Super Lig. Gündogan, who was used to swinging the baton in Pep Guardiola's perfectly organized orchestra, suddenly found himself in a game that is often characterized more by emotions and chaos than by tactical discipline. In his appearances so far for the Turkish record champions, it has become clear that he still needs to get used to this new wildness. While his passing rates are astronomically high as usual, and he can calm the game down like no other, he still lacks the connection to his new teammates, who often do not yet share his mental speed. Especially in the Champions League, where Galatasaray has great ambitions, Gündogan has not yet been able to put his stamp on the game as expected. But one must not forget that Gündogan is a diesel engine that needs time to reach operating temperature. He himself emphasized during his presentation that he is very happy and proud to have taken this step. With a contract until 2027 and a handsome net salary of 4 to 5 million euros, he also has the full trust of the club behind him. It is not the first time that Gündogan has needed time. Let's remember his early days at City or Barcelona. Once he has found his rhythm, he will also be the undisputed boss in midfield on the Bosphorus. But currently, it is still a matter of feeling his way. A search for the perfect harmony between his brilliant mind and the passionate hearts of his teammates. Interestingly, Gündogan is not the only superstar at Galatasaray with a German past who decided to make the move to Turkey this summer. Leroy Sané, the eternally unfinished talent of FC Bayern Munich, now also wears the red and yellow jersey. His departure from Munich was a bombshell, but one that had been announced. After turning down a contract extension with the German record champions, he sought, as he said himself, a new challenge and new stimuli. And where could one find more stimuli than in the cauldron of Istanbul? Sané's start in Turkey was, however, bumpy to say the least. Expectations were gargantuan, perhaps even greater than for Gündogan, because people do not expect strategic calm from Sané, but explosions, dribbling, and goals in rapid succession. In the first few weeks, however, he often appeared isolated, like a foreign body in a system that he did not yet understand. The Turkish media, known for their ruthlessness, were already sharpening their knives. Had he only come to collect a paycheck? Had he lost his competitive edge? But Leroy Sané wouldn't be Leroy Sané if he didn't show two faces here as well. In the final games before the winter break, the knot finally seemed to have burst. He himself stated for the record that he needed time to get to know the team and settle in. Now, however, it seems that everything is slowly getting into gear. His dribbles once again have that irresistible drive toward the goal, and the fans are beginning to love him. It is this love that his agent George Gardy cited as the decisive factor for the transfer. Sané needs the feeling of being needed and revered in order to call up his best performance. In Munich, this relationship was often cool, characterized by discussions about body language and consistency. In Istanbul, where every successful action is frenetically celebrated, he may have found exactly the environment he needs to reach world-class levels once again. Together with Gündogan, he forms a duo that, on paper, is probably the best the Super Lig has ever seen. The only question is whether they can consistently bring this theoretical quality onto the pitch. But while Gündogan and Sané are in the spotlight of the Champions League and playing for one of the country's biggest clubs, Another German striker has chosen a path that at first glance seems less glamorous, but perhaps all the more fitting: Davie Selke, the man who almost single-handedly shot Hamburger SV back into the Bundesliga with his 22 goals. After a season he described as the most beautiful year of his career, the player and the club could not agree on continuing their cooperation. A shock for many HSV fans, but an opportunity for Selke to fulfill his dream of playing abroad. He finally landed at Istanbul Basaksehir. Not a traditional club with millions of fans, but a club known for professional structures and tranquility. Perhaps exactly the right thing for a player like Selke, who often polarize people in Germany. On my channel today, you will experience the football of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, so don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any legendary stories and the stars of tomorrow. At Basaksehir, Selke is not the superstar who electrifies the masses, but the worker who is supposed to score the goals. And how is it going for him? Well, the balance after the first few months is mixed, but with a clear upward trend. In 6 appearances, he has 1 goal and 1 assist to his credit. That sounds meager for a top scorer of the second Bundesliga, but you have to consider the circumstances. The Super Lig is physically extremely demanding. The defenders are tough and uncompromising. That actually suits Selke, but he also had to pay his dues. A red card suspension slowed him down in the meantime, a moment that showed he still needs to adjust emotionally to the toughness of the league. But recently, after his return, he showed that face again that was so appreciated in Hamburg. He labored, he tore gaps, and he was crucially involved in his team's success, even if he didn't score himself. Selke at Basaksehir is not a misunderstanding, but a process. He is far away from the hustle and bustle surrounding Gündogan and Sané, but perhaps it is precisely this calm in the shadow of the giants that will help him find his goal-scoring instinct again in Turkey. So when we look at these 3 transfers, we see 3 completely different stories that still have one thing in common: the courage to change. For Ilkay Gündogan, it is the emotional return to his roots, combined with the enormous burden of leading as a figurehead. For Leroy Sané, it is the escape from the comfort zone of Munich into an adventure that could redefine his career. And for Davie Selke, it is the proof that he can also survive outside of Germany, far away from prejudices and pigeonholing. None of them has failed, but none has yet become the undisputed king of the league. They are all fighting in their own way with the pitfalls of a league that is often underestimated. The Super League does not forgive arrogance, it demands humility and toughness. To come back to our initial question, was it the bravest step or the beginning of the end? It was the necessary step. A step out of the familiar into a world that demands everything from them. They have not yet reached their goal, but they are on their way. And that is exactly what makes their story in Turkey so incredibly exciting to watch. We can be curious to see what the second half of the season brings.